There's more to being a grandparent than just showing up at Christmas and on birthdays with a smile and a gift bag. But I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Between us, Kathy and I have 5 grandkids. I have 3 grandkids who are grown now, living in southern Michigan. At the time they were little, I was living in Wisconsin, and I would travel down to see them as often as I could. It was largely on birthdays and holidays, that sort of thing. Kathy has 2 living in northern Florida, and she gets down there pretty regularly, which I encourage mightily. You hear it all the time. Grandkids are such a blessing. It's like the thing to say. But if we're honest, all grandkids are not a blessing. What about the problem kids? It's like we're expected to say grandkids are a blessing, and for the most part they are. Don't get me wrong. But there are situations where grandkids are not necessarily a blessing. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Let's get that little tidbit out of the way before we talk about all the fun things that we have with grandkids. What about the grandkids with special problems? There are a lot of problems with kids nowadays. It's a reality. But nobody ever says, "Oh, my grandkids are such a pain in the butt." You never hear that. The truth is, sometimes they are. You know. And what about the grandparents that are raising the grandkids? Big shout out to them. That's a tough gig, raising your grandkids. I mean, you had your trials and tribulations with your own kids, but then, to have to raise your grandkids too, that's a huge sacrifice. So, big shout out to all the grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. You're underappreciated. I'm not sure I could do it, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if I could. Fortunately, I don't have to find out. And that kind of segues into the difference between parenting and grandparenting. There are differences to be sure, but there are also similarities. Both have their ups and downs. And I'm sure you've run into it if you have grandkids, kids and grandkids, that there are differences in generational ideas about raising kids. Our parents didn't particularly care for the way we raised our kids, and sometimes we don't particularly care for the way our kids are raising our grandkids. I think that's just the way it is. Everybody has a different style, and we all make mistakes. Our parents made mistakes. We made mistakes. Our kids make mistakes. Our grandkids will make mistakes. We do the best we can, but we can still be a positive influence on our grandkids without crossing any boundaries or meddling. I mean, sometimes it means biting your tongue for sure. Sometimes it means saying yes to ice cream for breakfast. I think kids understand that there are different rules at Grandma and Grandpa's house than there are at home. Kids are smart enough to pick that up. And the question comes up, how involved should grandparents be? Legitimate question with different answers. How involved do you want to be? How involved do the parents want you to be? How involved can you be? Emotionally, physically, financially, distance? There are a lot of factors there. And how involved are you allowed to be? Those are not particularly easy questions sometimes. It's hard, sometimes it's hard to be honest answering some of those questions. And to be honest, some of those questions could be a whole video all by themselves. And they might be. We'll see. And the relationship with your grandkids changes as their age changes. It's more about their age changing than our age changing. Because they change pretty rapidly from, you know, youngsters to adolescents to teenagers to young adults. That seems to go a lot faster than we'd like it to. But our role as grandparents changes for all those different ages. Being a grandparent of a preschooler is a lot different than being a grandparent to a teenager. I'm sure you'll agree with that. When they're young, they love spending time with grandma and grandpa. Often, not always, often. When they get a little bit older, yeah, maybe a little bit less. When they get a little bit older yet, they have less time for us. It's the natural progression of things, I think. It's hard to accept for us sometimes, but that's the way it is. It's hard sometimes when you see your young adult, grown grandkids making some of the same mistakes you made, and and how much you'd like to advise them, but can't, of course. They have to make their own mistakes, the same as we made our mistakes. And that's, basically, it's a cliche, but that's how you learn, by making mistakes. You hope their mistakes aren't too big. You hope they're smaller than the ones you made yourself. But they'll make big mistakes too. But there's nothing we can do about that. And let's be honest, not all us grandparents are built the same way either. Not all of us have the same grandparenting gene. Some were born for it, and you can tell them right away. They love every minute of it, every up, every down, every sideways. And there are others that are less involved. And there are some that kind of struggle to connect, don't have a connection with kids. Maybe they'll do better when the kids are a little older. I don't know. But like I said, grandparents are not all built the same way. It's like parents. Not all parents have the parenting gene, unfortunately. But like I said, we do the best we can. There's no single way to do grandparenting well. Families are different, people are different, grandparents are different, kids are different, environments different. No two are alike. So there's no right way and wrong way. It's what fits with your particular situation, I think. And I think that's okay. That's vive la différence. Well, we just completed a little over a week with Kathy's oldest grandson, and it was great. I mean, it was a total joy. I mean, we had our moments, absolutely. You know, Sometimes my temper is shorter than I would like it to be, but I'm working on it. Every time we get together is a learning experience for me. It tests my tolerance. It teaches my tolerance. Doesn't test it exactly, but it teaches my tolerance, which is a good thing for me. So I appreciate that. And fortunately for us, our grandkids are all decent, good human beings. So we have it pretty easy as grandparents, which I'm eternally grateful for. Not everybody has it that easy and has it this good, and I appreciate that. So if you're struggling with it, hang in there. But you can't help but wonder, what kind of adults will they become? We hope we're around to see. We're optimistic, absolutely optimistic. Every reason to be optimistic. So again, if you're a first timer here, thanks for coming by. If you're not a first timer, thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, a little thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, comment. I always like the comments. I keep saying that. I love the comments. So if you're inclined, leave a comment down below and hit that little notification bell wherever it is, and you'll get a little notice when I post the next one. Of course, I'm posting every Sunday, still posting every Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. So, so check it out. Peace, joy, and ice cream for breakfast.